to many minds, the situation in 2012 is not different from what was happening in 2011 or 2010 for that matter. So why the decision at this time and at no other time? And that's where I probably was trying to tie in the issue of unrest in Bujumbura and all of that. Is there a particular reason why at this particular time? Again, some will also even think, of course, it's a sub-regional thing, as you see, and so it's not easy to pin it down to Ghana. But some of you think, is it possible the elections coming up, people have been around here, they probably have registered and will vote even though they're not Ghanaians? Why 2012? Why June 2012 and no other date? Many believe that when Ellen Johnson Sirleaf became president, perhaps that was a time. It didn't happen. Why now?
Right. Well, I can assure you it has nothing to do with Ghana's elections.
Right.
Absolutely nothing to do with those.
Okay.
But it has a lot to do with the situations in each of the host countries as well as the situation in Liberia. More so the situation in Liberia than the other host countries, but they also play a role. If you consider where Ghana was in 2011, for instance,
yes.
Or even 2010, we didn't have a Ghana Refugee Board. We didn't have a fully functioning Ghana Refugee Board after the elections in 2008. And it took some time before we got a fully functioning board. And considering the pivotal role that this board would play in coordinating cessation activities, it would have been actually quite difficult, possibly even disastrous for Ghana to try to implement the invocation of cessation with no Ghana Refugee Board. We got a fully constituted board in February of 2010.
Okay.
Oh no, sorry, of 2011. February of 2011. And shortly after that, we had the Ivorian situation. And that hit many countries in the region. And so it was not an ideal time to be talking about the invocation of cessation. And so that has a role to play, a part to play. But then also, if you look at what was happening in Liberia at the time, they were also hit hardest by the Ivorian crisis.
Okay.
And it was also important that they go through 2 presidential elections to ensure Liberian refugees in the region of the sustainability of Liberia's peace and democracy. So there were a lot of factors that had to do with it. Also, the decline of UN troops in Liberia. They were doing a lot of training of Liberian security forces in Liberia. And so we can't really make the cessation timeline conflict with the schedule for the training of security forces, for instance. And so as they are declining, then we start talking more and more about cessation and bringing more Liberian refugees back home. There were a lot of factors, but now is the ideal time for everybody. It's synchronized. If all of the host countries are ready to implement it, and Liberia itself is ready to receive those who return.
Do you have a number in terms of the refugees in question that you expect to go back?
At the moment, we have 11,300 registered Liberian refugees.
I see.
Now, it's important to stress that the option to go back is purely voluntary.
Okay.
So we do not force any refugee to return. And for that matter, it's not easy to put a figure to it unless we've carried out a verification exercise to find out exactly how many want to go out. Now, as I stated earlier on, the fact that now it's very clear that the cessation clause is coming into effect on the 30th of June is going to make a lot of people firmly decide on what to do. And chances are a lot more people would want to return to Liberia.
Realistically, they don't register by 30th March. Some people, almost, don't register. They fall into the status you're talking about where they have to go to the immigration. They don't go to the immigration. They don't take advantage of anything you're asking. What will happen?
Well, I hope that we do not have too many people just hanging in the system like that. But Ghana Refugee Board is mainly concerned with providing as much information as possible together with UNHCR to enable the refugees to make an informed choice. For people who remain in the system without any status, it will be up to Ghana Immigration Service to decide on what to do with them.
Because many cannot be identified, as a matter of fact. If the person is used to living in Kokomlemle or something, because a lot of them have also moved away from Bujumbura. which is a fact. In some few communities, people know people and know that, oh, this person is Liberian and all of that. And that, some of them even have Ghana names in Anabraka and all of that. How does...
The thing about those is, at some point, they will need some form of recognition.
Okay.
So let's say you have an emergency situation and you need to go access healthcare and you need to show your identification. Let's say you don't have an ID card, right, issued by any government because you're a refugee. You come to UNHCR for what we call an attestation form, which it's essentially a picture ID. Those, you can't do that anymore after June 30th. You will have no form of identification. Let's say you go for a job and you need to provide a work permit. To provide a work permit, you need a residence permit. To provide a residence permit, you need a passport. You have no government-issued passport or identification card. And so at some point, sooner or later, you will be faced with this situation and you will not be able to...
People go to commissioners for oath by the roadside all the time to do statutory declarations about the birth certificate and their name and all of those things. And it's done for them for a few CDs. With that, some people even are able to do passports and all of that, and Ghanaian citizenship. That's all they need.
That's true, except the difference is, in this situation, you have all the security agencies looking out for you. The Ghana Police Service is aware of the implication.
You may not even know how many children a person has.
True, but the Ghana
in 1990, he had 5 sons. One of them says his name is Ni Adekleg.
Yeah.
What shows that he's not Ni Adekleg, as an example.
That is a very good example.
You know.
But is that the case for everybody?
Not everybody, absolutely. Not everybody. But I'm just thinking, I'm looking at the system realistically. What really happens? What really will happen to anybody as a matter of fact? Some people, would UNHCR, for example, will stop taking care of them, so to speak. I mean, you will not be, you know you don't have any refugees. I mean, cessation has been invoked. You don't have a situation where you're thinking of food to take to a camp and all of those things. That is done.
Yes.
Doesn't that even make it easier for someone on the Bujumbura Road to go to Cape Coast and become a part of the society?
Possibly, and that's essentially their own form of integration. But that is, I will leave that for my government colleague to talk about. But I will just say this. In 2008, we had a similar, this isn't Ghana's first cessation clause invocation. In 2008, the cessation clause was invoked for Sierra Leonean refugees. And at the time, Ghana had only 260 Sierra Leonean refugees in the country.
Not many.
But since then, Sierra Leonean refugees are no longer of concern to the Ghana Refugee Board or to UNHCR, those who remain. And they cannot come to us for counseling, for instance. I mean, they are not factored into our operations. The problem here is that we have a much larger population to deal with. We have over 11,000.
That's huge.
So it's going to be more difficult, trickier to basically figure out who's going home and who's staying.
Is it all by air?
For now, it is all by air.
Wow.
For now.
I can't imagine the number of flights you are talking about.
It's a lot of flights.
You know, what's your own view on this one?
Well, at some point in time, just like Rabna said, you would, if you're a refugee, if you're a Liberian remaining in Ghana, you would need to have some kind of documentation. And if you have not declared yourself, if you've not declared your true nationality and you've not gone through the processes, I'm sure that at some point you find yourself in a tight corner, and the law will catch up with you eventually. So what we advise is that Liberians should opt for one of the durable solutions and go through the legal processes to authenticate, make their stay in the country legal.
I don't know if this helps our case or not, but we're also entering into an age where Ghana is moving towards biometric identification. You wouldn't have any, I mean, a lot of the countries in the region are talking about biometric passports and ID cards. You wouldn't be beneficiary to any of these.
That's assuming that they don't already have the old passports where they're just going to transfer.
Well, most of them don't, but you know.
They're quite proud of being Liberians, so they, as far as we know, they've maintained their Liberian citizenship.